our first quarter Women's Forest Congress virtual event. My name is Ara Erickson, and I am one of the steering committee members of the Women's Forest Congress. I also head up corporate sustainability at Weyerhaeuser in my day job. And I am really excited about today's session. We're going to spend just a few minutes bringing everybody, as people start to trickle in, just give a few updates about the Women's Forest Congress and what we've been up to and where we're headed this year. And then I'm going to spend a few minutes introducing our guest and facilitator today, Julie Pham, who's going to walk us through and spend the rest of the time on a topic that I think hopefully we are all really interested in hearing about today. So first, thank you for joining us today. It is morning out here in Seattle, Washington, where I am. I added into the chat that it's both sunny and raining at the same time. Wherever you are, I hope your morning, afternoon, or evenings are going well. The Women's Forest Congress has quite a year ahead of us. I'm going to summarize kind of three things that we're focused on. The first is that we want to make certain that our own house is in order, and the steering committee and some of the people behind the scenes who are working on the Women's Forest Congress have been hard at work making certain that the website is up to date, that we're continuing to share information with those who are interested in this community. We are working on governance documents to make certain it's very clear how we're organized. And we're starting to put together a strategic plan for what the future of the Women's Forest Congress truly can be. We are also committed to continue to have virtual quarterly events. And so this is the first of the four. And what we heard from the community was a focus on professional development and networking. And today's topic is fitting right into that our own professional development category. The Women's Forest Congress is also present at and supporting other events that are related. And so you'll hear at the end of the day today, other places the Women's Forest Congress will be present. And we hope to be able to see people and support people in continuing to build out this community this year. And then the third area is just trying to figure out kind of how we do this in today's environment, how we continue to foster the work of the Women's Forest Congress in related events and activities, and how we continue to grow a community in a way that's sustainable over the long run. So look for more information on the website. I hope that you are subscribed to the blog. As always, we are always looking for feedback about if we are reaching the community in the right way. And if there's other things that you'd like to see, you can always get in touch with, I think it's still info@womensforestcongress.org. A few just business items quickly. I want to thank Dovetail Partners for taking over as fiscal sponsor and also organizer behind the scenes for the Women's Forest Congress, and particularly focused on fundraising. So thank you, Dovetail Partners. And many thanks to Amy Doty, who spends much time behind the scenes making certain that everything is running smoothly. Amy runs her own company, meetings and such, and she has been with us from the beginning, making certain that things are happening, things like that we can all get onto a Zoom call together, and much more. So thank you, Amy. So we're going to move into the topic of today, which is respect. And I am really honored to be able to introduce Julie Pham. Julie and I were just talking about when we first met each other, and we figured out it was 8 years ago. Julie and I were in a leadership program together focused on multi-stakeholder collaboration. And a group of young leaders were sent to Boston, to a university there, to focus on what's a topic that we could bring back to our community and try to work on and tackle together. And while we didn't necessarily bring back a solution to Seattle, we did develop some great relationships with those who we were with. And from the day one, I was inspired by Julie's willingness to ask hard questions and willingness to be introspective about how we all showed up. I was in a space that I was uncomfortable in. It was new for me, with people who I was quite honestly quite intimidated by. And Julie created a space for me to feel welcome. And then in the 8 years since then, we have spent many hours, usually on long walks, talking about how we show up in the world and how other people show up in the world, and questioning if we are asking the right questions, and what did it mean the way we were acting a certain way, and how was that going to impact other people? I have great admiration for Julie. She has taken, which was years of building out sort of thought leadership and ways of creating cultures of how people can work better together. And I am paraphrasing her work in very poor forms. I'm going to let her present her own work, but how we can work better together And she was brave and went out and put her thoughts to paper and started developing curriculum and trainings and launched her company Curiosity Based. And when you do that and you put your thoughts out there, you are at risk of being vulnerable. You're at risk of people questioning what you're trying to say and how you're saying it. And Julie inspires me every day to not be afraid to go out there and try something, to really challenge us in how we show up. So when the Women's Forest Congress Steering Committee was talking about what we wanted to do this year, and we were talking about how do we deal with things that are how do we have hard conversations with people, and how do we work through challenging moments, whether that's in our own personal lives, at work, in our own teams, in our volunteer opportunities, and in the world in general, especially today. And so it was really an easy leap then to think about who could come to the Women's Forest Congress and help us start thinking through how we bring challenging conversations into the places where we are. And Julie's 7 Forms of Respects book, which she wrote, which is going to be our topic of focus for today, seemed to be something that resonated with both the steering committee and also we hope is going to resonate with the full participants today. So with that, I am really excited to be able to have Julie present her book and her sort of ways of thinking about respect. I'm excited for the questions that the conversation we're going to have. Julie has already set up, no surprise to me, an incredible run of show and a way for us to have an engaged conversation today. I'm looking forward to it. She has also already set up ways that we can continue to learn from today. Today's just the beginning of a conversation that I hope us in this community can continue as we move forward. So with that, Julie has shown up here right now, a little bonus, and she'll put that up in the chat later. But I really do encourage everyone, if they're interested in what you're hearing today, to subscribe to the newsletter from Curiosity Based. And then I happen to have reread the book a little bit this morning that we're going to be talking about, and it's very small and short, but really full of great material. So there's going to be ways for people to be able to take a peek at it later. So with that, Julie, I'm going to start with sort of this first question what are the 7 forms of respect? What it's about. So it's a big topic. How are we going to cover that today?
Yes. So, before we do, I just want to also thank you, and I just because you have really supported me through this journey. And by the way, I actually self-published my book. I did a crowdfunding campaign, and Ara was a big support in that. And I used in the book names of people who contributed to that campaign. So you can see an Ara in there, and it's not her real example, just to let you know. So, and also I'm just going to put that bonus in the chat message. I know this is being recorded, and I always like to reward the people who are showing up live. And so if you subscribe to the newsletter before 9 a.m. tomorrow Pacific time, then you will get access to a digital course if you want to follow up on this. So the 7 forms of respect, for those, one of the easiest ways to describe it is for those who know the 5 love languages. If you know the 5 love languages, then think of it as a version of that, that we can agree on how respect feels, and we disagree on what it looks like. And love and respect are different, though. You can love someone and not respect them, and you can respect someone and not love them. And so the 7 forms of respect at its core, it's a framework to help people improve their communication and their relationships. Right now, the first book is at work. I eventually plan to get to that home life version. And it shows that respect it's relative. It's relative. It's subjective. It's dynamic. And it's also contradictory. Can you imagine why it's contradictory? Do you always do what you say you're going to do? I don't. And so it's contradictory because humans are contradictory, and we mean to, we want to, but we don't always do what we say we're going to do. So I'm going to share my screen right now and just share with you what are the 7, and then I'm going to show this little video that illustrates it well. So here are the 7. We use this acronym called PICA, and I'm also going to put into the chat this so you can, for those of you who want to read it on your own here. It's procedure, punctuality, information, candor, consideration, acknowledgement, and attention. And I've found that the very best way to help illustrate this is by showing a little video where you can also see some of my acting skills. And I'm going to show it now. I'm Dr. Julie Pham, and I've developed the 7 Forms of Respect, a framework to help you understand respect. There is no one way to interpret respect. Learn how the 7 Forms of Respect can help you navigate this complexity.
We can interpret the same statements differently, and it's okay that we do. Here are examples with each form of respect.
This is how I want you to do the job. I can't believe she's telling me how to do my job. I really like how clear she is with her expectations. I just have to remind you, we only have 5 minutes left for this meeting. I feel like I'm being rushed. I appreciate how mindful she is of my time. I'm going to copy you on all of the emails so that you know what's going on. I just hate getting all these extra emails. I really appreciate being kept in the loop like this. Have you thought about taking a different approach to this work? I can't believe that she's challenging my work. Who does she think she is? She's so committed to making the process better. I didn't ask you for your help because I know how busy you are and I just didn't want to overwhelm you. I still wanted to be asked, even if I was going to say no. She is so observant about what my needs are. You are doing such an awesome, amazing, great job. Did she expect anything less than great? Why does she have to keep telling me how great I am? I really appreciate how passionate and excited she is about my work. I am focused on our conversation. Let me know what you're thinking. I feel a lot of pressure to talk here. I just wish that she would talk more so I don't have to talk as much. I can't believe how attentive and focused she is.
Respect is relative. Visit formsofrespect.com.
So as you watch that video, you might be thinking, oh, there are times when I thought that was respectful. And other times I thought, oh, I didn't like that. And it could be the same behavior, and maybe it was by someone else. And it was just, the only difference was it was done by 2 different people. Or maybe it was also just dependent on your mood that day, because this gets at how respect can feel dynamic and relative, because we change even from the morning into the afternoon. So the other thing about the 7 Forms of Respect is, at its core, it's actually not teaching you how to be respectful. It's about curiosity around respect. So I'm going to drop in here this link to this poll. This is just a 2-question poll. And if you could just answer this, it's a single choice, and it gets at practicing curiosity, our willingness when it's hard. I know we're all curious people, but I'm talking about when you don't want to, when it's hard to practice curiosity. So I put that in the chat, and I'm also going to put it here on the screen so you can scan that QR code too.
And while those results are coming in, as long as you can hear me over the music, I do want to say this is an example of vulnerability. Julie just showed us 3 of her personalities on that video. And it's always hard to watch yourself in a video. So Julie, really well done. And great to see you as both boss and then as feeling a respected person and feeling disrespected. And I hope that other people started to sort of see that same type of, we can have such a different reaction depending on who is bringing that information to us or who's presenting that to us, and also just how we're feeling that day. And sometimes the same words we can really interpret completely differently. So I'm excited to see how this results of this Menti poll come in.
All right, I think I'm going to start to share what the results are. And okay, here we go. Present. I'm switching the screens. So you can see what your colleagues said. So the first question is rate. Can you see it okay? Yeah. The first question is rate the willingness of your colleagues to practice curiosity with each other when it's hard. And so the vast majority of you said somewhat. And then there's essentially 30 of you who said somewhat or below. There was like a 13 who said very low or low, 17 who said somewhat, and 6 said high. And then the next question was like, rate your willingness to practice curiosity when it's hard. And so here we see actually our first highs. No one, wait, no, there were some people who said high. Let me flash back. 6 said high for your colleagues, and 7 said high, and 2 said very high. So this is actually pretty standard with what we see, where people rate themselves as higher than what they would rate their colleagues. And the reason why I ask this question is it's the willingness, because curiosity actually takes it's a practice. A lot of people talk about it as if it's a trait, as if it's something we do, or we as something we have or don't have. And I actually think of it as a practice. And sometimes it's really hard to practice it, maybe because we are frustrated, maybe because our emotions are getting in the way, maybe because we feel like we've had this conversation before, maybe because there are some power dynamics that are happening. And so this is just to see that there's a difference between what we would rate ourselves and what we'd rate our colleagues. If you have any comments about that, you can put that in the chat. And by the way, I'm going to share these results with people. Ara, do you want to comment on it?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. I think it's interesting to see how we might rate ourselves versus how we think our colleagues are. And I don't know if anyone else did this, but it was hard for me to decide if those were different. Like, was I willing to put myself at a different rating than I might rate my colleagues? So always good question. And I think it's how are we showing up, and then how do we think our colleagues are showing up? And even that is its own sort of subjective view, because it's our guess of how we think they are. Which, Julie, I think that kind of leads me into my first question, because I think you did a great job, thank you, in sort of just putting the 7 forms of respect out there so we know what those sort of what the acronyms are, what those words are, and some examples. And I want to send a step back for a little bit and have you share with us, like, what inspired you to write this book? There was a reason why you decided to leave your former job and put pen to paper and self-publish a book. And what inspired you? What got you to that point?
So there are 3 elements. And sorry, I'm just moving my, okay. So there were 3 things that inspired me. So first, my lived experience. The second is my community building experience, and the third is the research. So starting with my lived experience, a really important part of my identity is being a Vietnamese refugee. My parents and I came as boat people from Vietnam, and I grew up American at school, Vietnamese at home. And then I went to the UK for grad school, and I continued to live in Germany, France, and Vietnam as an adult while I was doing my research. And in all of those places, you have to adapt. And how people want to be treated, what they think of as respect, changes. And so that really got me thinking about how the context, as the context changes, then our expectations have to change. And so that's number 1, is the lived experience. Number 2 is my community building experience. So after I finished my doctoral work as pursuing my PhD in history, I came back to Seattle to help run my family's Vietnamese newspaper. And I started to do a lot of mobilizing with different community groups and ethnic media and small businesses, and bringing together people from really diverse backgrounds. What I saw was friction would emerge. I mean, you put any kind of diversity. I also worked with Ara on that multi-sector work as well. You bring together people from different backgrounds, and friction emerges, and we have different expectations around what we want, and there's not a language to describe what we need. Instead, people just say, I need respect, or I need this. And so I remember once I was working with on a community building group, there was an engineer and a union organizer, and the engineer kept asking these deep probing questions, and the union organizer felt challenged because they were peers. Why are you asking me all these questions? I got this. And so that was kind of the spark of, there's a difference in our expectations. And the third element was actually around, or the third part was doing the research. Because when I started doing this research, my first question was, how do you want to be treated? And people kept bringing up the word respect. And that's when I realized that respect, but they had different ways to describe it. And so that's when I landed on respect as what inspired me to write this, to write this book.
Thanks, Julie. I think it'd be great to kind of dive into how then those 7 forms of respect and the framework you've developed helps us actually with communication and relationships at work. Because I can imagine, I heard you say you're thinking about this for a more personal life view, but how do we then bring this different views of respect into our way we communicate and who we relate to at work?
Mm-hmm. So to think about respect as relative in the workplace, I think respect lives in layers. And so I like to use the analogy of language. So actually, let's take Warehouser, right? And so you've got the leadership, the CEO, leadership team, and what they prioritize as the top forms of respect, that's the national language. And then Ari, you've got your department. And there's also the other departments of being out in the field, right? There's other things that other functions, and they also have their own leaders. You have finance, you have marketing, you have the ops. They all have their own leaders and their own priorities and their own functions. And so what they prioritize as their top forms of respect, I liken that to regional dialects. And then there's me, the individual. And I have my own preferences as well in terms of how I want to be respected and how I like to give respect. And so people who can do best in an organization are those who are multilingual. And so the point is to realize that we need to adapt to the team, the function that we're in, and also have some really clear questions of why do we prioritize certain forms of respect? What are the consequences when we don't? Is this a nice to have or is this a must have? And to have clarity around that. Because a lot of times when in the lack of clarity, what happens is people just do what the leader does. And people do what you do, not what you say, but what you do. And so I find that a lot of organizations spend all this time crafting these beautiful culture statements of how to be, and yet they don't ask the hard questions of, is punctuality absolutely necessary? So for example, if you're in a work that is not, that doesn't require strict deadlines, then maybe that's not something you're going to prioritize. And maybe you're going to prioritize candor instead. And so it's about trying to get at what are the top ones that we're going to prioritize. Not that and that's not saying that some aren't important and some are important. It's just saying, what do we prioritize considering the nature of our work? And that can make it a bit more objective versus, oh, this is what the CEO likes, or this is what the executive director likes. We're following their personal preferences. And people tend to be more okay with, okay, if this supports our shared mission versus someone's personal preferences, I can get on board with that. And it also helps them understand, yeah, when I go to work, maybe this isn't the thing that I personally like or prioritize, but I can do that because at work, I'm trying to uphold our shared mission together.
Julie, what do you do when those shared missions may not be as clear to everybody? How do you, and you use this word sort of multilingual, does that mean having to adjust to everyone else's sort of language around respect? Or how does your sort of structure help create that or help bring that into the workplace?
So I don't think it's about, oh, I just have to adapt to other people. It's actually about having conversations of why, for example, are we prioritizing such specific following procedure, for example. So in the military, procedure, in a large bureaucracy, procedure is going to be really important. And actually, you can think about the stage of your company and the size of the organization as well. So looking at those different things can help you figure out, do we need to prioritize this form or not? And it's how do we get curious? How do we have conversations? And also, how do we play devil's advocate to really stress test, is that something that is important to us. So, for example, if you're in an emergency room, it's not going to be punctuality because it's not about who came on time. It's about who needs the most care. Who needs the most care urgently. And then also to recognize that each of the forms of respect take work. So one of the big things I hear is people say, oh, candor, that's great. Let's have candor. It's just, but are you ready for candor? Do you have the systems in place for candor? Do you make time for candor? And even maybe that's learning how to give each other candor. And is that a priority or not? Maybe candor is nice, but actually we really need to prioritize attention. And then also understanding what we deprioritize. I spent 9 years working in tech. For a lot of tech companies, multitasking is a sign of performance. And attention is not a big deal. And they deprioritize and say, okay. And so that's also kind of being unapologetic about what we're not going to prioritize because we want to prioritize some other ones.
Great. Thank you for that kind of more detailed example a little bit. I think this kind of gets probably into the something that you called the rubber band rule.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what you mean by the rubber band rule.
So I first want to backtrack and talk about when I was doing this research, I asked people, what does respect mean to you? And a lot of people brought up the golden rule. So the golden rule is treat people the way you want to be treated. Now, the thing about the golden rule is what if people don't want to be treated the way you want to be treated? And then there is the platinum rule, which is treat people the way they want to be treated. Now, the thing about that is, what if you don't want to treat them the way they want to be treated? So, for example, Melody, I see your name on, so I see your picture, so I'm going to call on you. Melody's like, publicly criticize me, please. I want it. I feel we should model it. And Ara, you're like, oh, that feels so cringy to me. I just can't do it. I know, Melody, you say it's okay and you want it, but I grew up in a place, in a home where that was considered really disrespectful. And so that's the platinum rule. So the issue with the platinum rule is sometimes you don't want to treat people the way they want to be treated. And so then there is what I call the rubber band rule. So I have a rubber band here to illustrate this. So what the rubber band rule shows is we are stretchy. Melody, I want to respect you, so I'm going to stretch for you, right? Even though I'm kind of ambivalent, you want me to read all the prep emails, and I don't think I need to, but I know you're going to ask me, so I'm going to do it for you, right? And then like when I'm with Amy and Ara, man, they love their compliments. All right, I'll stretch and make all this small talk and talk about and tell them how amazing they are because I know they really like that, right? And I want to be respectful, so I'm going to stretch and stretch. And what happens is over time, when we're stretching and stretching, you know what happens? We snap and break like a rubber band. So the rubber band rule is knowing what are my internal breaking points? What is going to make me snap? And that is different for everyone. This is actually a matter of self-respect. This is a matter of being able to articulate what I want and what is that based on? Because oftentimes we don't even know what we want. We just say, I want respect, but what does that look like? And how do you explain that to someone else? And so in the workplace, I see often people say, oh, that was a toxic environment. It was horrible, but they're not able to they never articulated actually what matters to them. And so with the rubber band rule, it's knowing, okay, what are my internal breaking points? And also understanding that context matters and it's dynamic. So my rubber band, I might be more stretchy for someone who I've worked with for a long time. They're annoying, but man, I'll stretch for them because I get it. And then think about when you're in certain teams or with or maybe the organization as a whole, and your rubber band can be different at work and at home. I am way more stretchy at home than I am at work. And so what that helps, that mental model of this rubber band helps you understand, okay, it's not that I'm yielding, it's just that I'm stretching. And I will admit that I'm so stretchy, oftentimes I don't know until I broke and then I flip. And I'm working on that myself. Just, okay, prevent this, set some boundaries first. And so that's the takeaway here is just to remember that the rubber band rule, it's identifying what matters to us, which means if there are certain things that matter to us, then that means that there are probably certain things that matter to other people as well. And we're not always going to get what we want, especially in the workplace. And that's where it goes back to what I was saying earlier, when you said, how does this work at work. It's just, let's have clarity around what we are doing as a group, not to try to make everyone happy. That's actually one of the big differences for 7 forms of respect in, say, Enneagram or Myers-Briggs, because it's not about trying to understand what each person wants and to adjust, because that's exhausting. It's actually trying to understand, okay, on this team, what are we going to prioritize? And even if I don't personally like it, so for example, I don't personally, information is not one of my personal preferences, but I do it for my team because that's what we need at our org size and our stage of work and the stage of the company that we're in. So I want to actually ask all of you, I'm going to launch a poll here. I want to ask how much you feel that you are stretching for your colleagues. And so I'm going to share the screen again. And these are 3 questions. And I'm going to put this in the chat too, the link in the chat as well. Okay, just put the chat or the link in the chat. Melody, I saw your question. I'll answer it during the Q&A.
Julie, as those answers are coming in, as you were talking about sort of the snapping and the stretching and the difference between that and maybe our own boundaries. I was recently in an experience where I told somebody I couldn't be part of something because it was sort of too hard for me to be knowing that that thing was going on, speaking vaguely. And that person actually called and said, I really want to understand where your boundaries are. I really appreciated this about this person. And how do I help support that? And I actually said, you know what? I actually need to be more clear about what I mean by that. I can't just expect you to be constantly trying to gauge where mine are. And it made me really think about how do I verbalize what my boundary actually was and where it was making me snap because I had snapped. And so that sort of, I like that it's not about someone else trying to always respect our own boundaries, because I need to first articulate what those are. I was just thinking about sometimes we get caught in having people trying to interpret what those are without being clear about it.
Yeah, and Ara, you bring up something about when I talk about curiosity as a practice, and this is in some forms of respect, it's really about curiosity. There's inward curiosity. So I think of actually there's 3 elements to curiosity. There's self-awareness, and then there's relationship building, and then there's clear communication. And so it has to start with, I need to ask myself what my boundaries are. And when I say them out loud, is that it? Because sometimes we just, expect people to read our minds. And I'll also say one of the things that inspired me, the conversation around respect, especially in the US, is respect versus disrespect. And it's a binary. Either if I don't get what I like, I would have been disrespected. And actually, I want to shift the conversation to what forms, these are my forms of respect. What are your forms of respect? And that assumes we want to respect one another. And we just have different ways of seeing it. All right, I bet you want to see what everything, let me share with you the results here. Okay. Can you see the poll? All right. So my first question, how aligned are your colleagues in having a shared understanding of respect in your current organization? So see a solid 3.3 right in the middle here. But you can also see 13 of you are saying, hey, it's a 4. And 3 of you are saying it's a 5. But most of you, actually, that's generally that's good. Like the most of it is actually in that higher range. And I want to be clear. I didn't ask you how respected you feel. That's a shift. I'm asking you what's the alignment? What's your shared understanding of what respect means? Because I don't think of respect as something we measure and it's, oh, we have a lot of respect or low respect. It's actually, have we actually had conversations around what respect means here? Because maybe other people think that they're being respectful, but that's because you have different ideas around it. And that's how do you slow down and talk about it? The second poll is what causes misalignment around respect in your organization? And I see here the top is lack of clarity from leadership. And then I see job function differences. And then there was also generational differences, cultural differences, and departmental differences. And the lowest was actually lack of using digital communication tools. Oh, 6 people put other. If you want to put the other in the chat, please do. And 8 of you said working remotely. So actually, typically working remotely is the lowest one. And so it's interesting that lack of using digital communication tools is the lowest here. But working remotely tends to be low because it's just intentional communication isn't, it doesn't matter if it's online or in person, it has to be intentional. And so then the last, how much do you stretch as a person working in the forest sector or community? And so I see here 15 of you said uncomfortable stretch, almost snapping daily, snapped many times already. And so actually the majority of you said uncomfortable stretch or above, because we also had not at all, a little bit comfortable stretch. Ara, do you want to comment on any of these?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to sort of challenge us to be thinking about what it means to be stretching. And I do want to comment on Melody's comment in the chat. There's a moment of stretching for our colleagues. Then there's really inappropriate behavior. And I think those are really different and important for us to recognize that us stretching or our colleagues stretching for us should not be, this is not about moving into completely inappropriate and illegal behavior. We should not be stretching to be fitting into a mold that is truly a hostile place to be in. So I'm very sorry, Melody, for your experience. And thank you for sharing that openly in the chat. And I do think that that sort of snapping almost regularly picture, Julie, it was interesting that not a lot of people selected that one. So I think we could see that as like, there's many in this community who are willing to stretch and are being stretched. But we haven't hit a breaking point necessarily, which is good to hear. And I wonder if there's a self-selection also of those of us who are part of the Women's Forest Congress community who are willing to do that stretch and willing to help others stretch as well. So I think we're actually going to be transitioning into some Q&A. And so I think this is the right moment to start addressing some of the questions that are coming in the Q&A, Julie.
Yeah, and let me just throw this up here right now, this one, and I'm going to answer those. I just want to share with you. There is one closing poll, and if you could put, I'm going to play this for a minute so people can put in their answer the closing poll and also the Q&A.
Okay.
And as you do that, I'm going to think of answers for what was asked already. And that.
Yeah. So thank you. Yeah, let's go into that closing poll, provide some of your answers through that one. And then also, if you're going to please write your questions in the Q&A, and Julie and I are going to both try to kind of watch the Q&A and see if there's some common questions that are coming in and address those. So feel free to put those in. There's already some in there, so thank you very much. I'm going to try to answer the closing poll as well. It looks like I'm multitasking, but I am opening up the
And this is just a moment to actually reflect on what was a takeaway, and then we can go into that because I think it'll inform the Q&A more too. Oh yes, sorry. Let me put in the direct link.
So as that poll is coming in, and as we are thinking about questions, we have, well, I think we'll probably have about 5 minutes or so of being able to answer some questions to Julie. This obviously, in a short session, cannot be explaining the entire book or the entire framework of the 7 forms of respect. But we do hope it was an introduction to sort of how to think about respect. And there's lots of other ways that, other authors, other frameworks. This is a pretty simple one, not simple as in easy, but simple and sort of easy to digest and quick to digest, and something to continue to build on. I will say in the book, there are also some worksheets around our own sort of assessments of how we want to give and receive respect, and good dialogue, and encourage people to take a peek at it. In the meantime, there are some questions that are coming in.
Yeah.
Julie, do you want to start with
Yeah.
one in particular, and then I'll start trying to consolidate a few as well.
Yes. So, and actually, so I want to, so I saw questions around gender and around race and how that impacts. If I haven't done the research where to do correlations of what's your, we tried asking those questions and we found that there was more resistance. And it's just, I just want people to start thinking about this. And this goes back to how do we practice curiosity around respect? Because I also don't think it's prescriptive. Women always think this, men think this. If you're Asian, you think this. Because at the end of the day, we belong to multiple cultures, communities, and identities at the same time. And so what the 7 forms of respect emphasizes is inward curiosity, because for example, when I lived in Vietnam, I really care about punctuality. And that's because growing up, my mom was always late picking me up from school. And so I said, I'm not going to do that as an adult. I feel anxiety around it. And then when I lived in Vietnam, I noticed a lot of people would cancel on me last minute. And I was just, why don't they tell me ahead of time? And then a friend told me, oh, because to tell you ahead of time would mean that they were making a decision, a choice, and the choice was not to be with you. And so that's why they wait till the last minute. Oh, so they're trying to be respectful. Okay. And so my point being, I I don't think I don't have the research. That's not my research. And I think what I really want people to encourage people to do is to think, what is this based on? What I care about, what is that based on? Because I'll tell you, I'm an oldest child. That I'm the oldest daughter, that impacts a lot of how I think about respect. I'm a Gen Xer. That thinks a lot influences. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. All of those different identities influence how I think about respect. Melody, what you said about being physically assaulted, I'm so sorry that happened. And I also tell people, look, we're not talking about illegal things, because disrespect, that's beyond disrespect. That is just illegal. And so there is this whole big gray category though of things that are, that's not about black and white, legal, not legal. That's where we can apply the 7 forms of respect, because it goes back to one person might like it, another person might not, and how do we talk about it?
Julie, there's a question in the Q&A from Mary Kate. Thanks, Mary Kate, for all your comments and your questions. And one of them, Mary Kate's question is, as a leader in a company, first of all, great that your colleagues are here. I also have some colleagues here that are going to get to hold me accountable to some of these conversations. But as a leader in your company, what's your top tip for encouraging a culture of respect and then helping others learn about the 7 forms within a business, other than let's all read this book together?
Well, actually, one of my favorite questions that you can ask as a connection exercise with your team is, who in your life and what experiences have influenced how you think about respect? I shared with you my mom and always getting picked up late, and that really influencing me, because I had a negative reaction. Someone else could have that same experience and say, what's the big deal? Time is flexible. And so for us to actually look inward and to share that with one another so we can understand where we're coming from. And I think that's very different from asking, why does that matter to you? I like to ask what stories, what is that based on? Because why, people can say punctuality is important. Well, why? Because it's respectful. Well, why? Because that's what you're supposed to do. And that doesn't tell me anything about you. And it also makes me feel like you're kind of just, you're lecturing to me and we're not connecting. So a simple way to to just start is, hey, let's just talk about what experiences in our life. And it doesn't have to be, I shared a family example. I can share a work example too. In college, I had a professor who would just tell me, your writing is like vomit. Why do you give it to me this way? But I developed really tough skin for constructive feedback. And so later on, I was like, come on, give it to me. Tell me what's wrong. Right. And that changed how I think about candor. And so people who talk about their first leaders, even their bosses now, and this is and people who you might also be influenced by the people who are reporting to you as well. And this shows how our ideas around respect can evolve over time. That we do change. It's not this fixed universal thing. And that's the way we talk about respect now, as if it's fixed and universal. And so what I really want people to get is to understand it's relative. And actually I'll share one other thing. I talked about before how we talk about respect now is respect versus disrespect. And I actually like to shift that framing to disrespect versus lack of respect in the forms that matter to you or matter to me. And so what I mean by that is I actually think of disrespect as something that's intentional. So Mary Kate, I know you don't like it and I did it anyway. Ha ha ha. Right? That's intentional. You kept telling me not to do it and I keep doing it because it's like whatever. And I haven't explained why. I'm just intentionally doing it. But lack of respect in the forms that matter to you, maybe Mary Kate, it's because I'm applying the golden rule and I'm doing what I think is respectful. And maybe it's because we don't know each other that well. And maybe it's because you keep saying it's okay when I do it and you condone it. So those are the things. It's actually just about pausing and saying, is this intentional disrespect or is this lack of knowing each other? Or me actually saying it's okay again and again? What is my role in that?
Well, Julie, I don't see any other questions coming in and we're getting close to the top of the hour. I really appreciated the examples you gave of how this doesn't have to be really complicated. We can ask those questions to each other. Who in your life and what experience does influences your views of respect? I really appreciated this concept of that it's not fixed and it's not universal and it is relative. And it's going to change and it's going to change in the different circumstances we're in. I think that the Women's Forest Congress, our community in this whole kind of concept has been, how do we address different types of challenges through different types of lenses than we may be having done traditionally or in the past or sort of the norm. And so I think the views of respect is really fitting in there. How do we address things in understanding that there may be different approaches to something? And in order to do that well, we're going to have to know who we are working with or who we're trying to work with, and that starting with respect and respectful conversations around that is something that we're all continuing to improve on and continuing to work on. Thank you for the comments that are coming in to the chat. I agree. Very good timing for many of us, both in our probably professional lives, personal lives, the world around us. So thank you. Thank you, Julie, for putting up some of the comments or the more resources on here. Julie's on LinkedIn under Curiosity Based. And she also has, as a reminder, for real-time participants, you can get this free 1-month access. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how we all continue to help support each other in developing respectful relationships in our professional lives and in our personal lives. Julie, anything kind of for the final thoughts? And then if not, we're going to turn it over to Amy to bring us home for the day.
Just thank you. Thank you for inviting me to share this.
Thank you, Julie, for being here today. Amy, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Julie and Ara, for this discussion today. Lots of really wonderful things to think about and take back into the workplace. So I really appreciate your time today and sharing your research with us. Julie, I am going to share a couple of slides before we drop off today. And then I'll give you your time back. So 1 second while I pull up my screen here. So I did want to let folks know that, as Ara mentioned, we have a number of virtual gatherings coming up throughout the year. We'll plan to do quarterly gatherings. So we will have a session in June looking at building trust and relationships. Our date is being re-looked at just to ensure that we have appropriate folks on the call with us and can share great conversation and information around that topic. Our second of the year will be, or third, excuse me, of the year will be September 9th on self-advocacy and articulating values and your value proposition. And then December 9th, we'll close out the year with a topic to be confirmed. So if you have thoughts around, as Ara mentioned, our plan this year is to really look at professional development or skills building. Feel free to reach out, shoot me an email at info@womensforestcongress.org if you have thoughts, and happy to entertain those as we decide on a final topic for the end of the year. I also want to take a minute to thank our supporters of the Women's Forest Congress. As you can see here, it's a large breadth of organizations and individuals who've supported us financially so that we can provide these wonderful quarterly gatherings as well as do the work of the Women's Forest Congress. So thank you to those listed here. And if you want to see your logo or your name listed on that slide and at our website, we'd love to do that. And so here's a QR code where you can make a financial donation to the Women's Forest Congress. In addition to our virtual gatherings this year, we will be on the road. And so you'll find that we'll have various meetups throughout the forest sector space at various events across throughout the year, 2 that are already planned and we're working towards. We'll have a Women's Forest Congress meetup luncheon at the Sustainable Forestry Initiative Annual Conference coming up May 22nd, excuse me, in Minneapolis. Link there to learn more and register. This is part of your registration of the SFI conference, so no additional or separate registration is required. You'll just look for some tables marked Women's Forest Congress when you're there with us on the 22nd. And then in October at the SAF National Convention, we'll once again host the Women in Naturals Resources meetup, and look forward to seeing folks in Hartford, Connecticut with that as well. Registration is not open yet for the SAF convention, but the link there will provide you more information on their website. Again, we'll be looking at different opportunities throughout the year. So if your organization is hosting an event and you would like to schedule or have a Women's Forest Congress meetup or some sort of opportunity there, feel free to email us again at info@womensforestcongress.org. And with that, thank you all so much for being with us today. Again, here's that email address if you want to reach out. And we really appreciate everyone joining us today, and hope you enjoy the rest of your first day of spring.